Reason number 2, sexual addiction. This is another large reason people fly from all over to come see us. Sex addiction can cause sexlessness. Now that sounds crazy, right? But sex addiction, what happens is, and then there's 6 types of sex addicts, and there's the biological type where they, the masturbation, porn, they connect neurologically to an object world, and this becomes part of the problem. They prefer the object world. They prefer the object voice. They can become psychologically addicted to the voice of the addiction, the things that are said and done that compensate psychologically in their lives. Spiritually, it could be how they try to fill the God hole. Okay, they may have sexual abuse, and that might be part of their sex addiction, which we'll cover in its own segment next. And then they could also be intimacy anorexic sex addicts, where they have both going on. That's why you want to watch every segment, because there's a lot of people who have both. In sex addiction, at least 1/3 of the men, and a little more than that of the women that are sex addicts, have intimacy anorexia. And they also might have a mood disorder, which we'll cover some of those as well, but that they're compensating with the sex addiction. So what is a sex addict? Sex addict is someone who's using sex, either medicate past pain, current stress, in a way that is unhealthy or destructive in their life. So let me give you what addiction looks like. Now, if you're a sex addict, you know you're a sex addict. You've tried to stop, you've cried, you've prayed, you've done your thing, but you can't. And you just feel like a failure. Okay, if you're married to a sex addict, you feel a lot of feelings. Betrayed, hurt, depending on the behavior, can be really severe pain. And that's legitimate, and your grief and trauma is legitimate. Please hear me clearly. If you are married to a sex addict, you have been hurt. And that hurt all by itself, you might want to get some help. And again, you can always call our office for that. Now, if you're addicted to anything, these would be what you go through. But let's talk about it as it relates to sex. You have made efforts to stop. Oh, I gotta stop doing this. I gotta stop seeing them. I gotta stop calling them. I gotta stop going on the internet. You've tried, okay? Number 2, you've made promises to stop, whether to yourself, I'm never going to do that again. That was really out of control. Or to God, I'm not going to do that anymore, God. Or to your spouse, I'm never going to look at that again or do that or call her again or call him again. And you do it anyway. Okay? Promises. Number 3, there's consequences. They might be legal consequences. They might be professional consequences. They might be personal consequences where your children don't talk to you anymore. Or you lost a spouse. Or you've lost a business opportunity, or you lost a political or religious career, or something. You've had a consequence. Number 4, you keep using even after the consequences occurred. I had a stepdad who had lung cancer, had his throat taken out, had one of those little voice box put in, and he still smoked after that. Okay, and died shortly after that. He just kept using. So using after consequences. More. It takes more and more and more. It might be more of the same behavior, but you find yourself spending a lot more activity and time going at it. It takes more, okay? Tolerance, which means even though you might be doing more, you're not getting the same effect. And so you might have to go to different or even greater amounts or experiment inside of your addiction, your sex addiction. So what was really able to get you a high 5 years ago is nothing to you today. That's a sign of tolerance, and it's also a sign of escalation. Withdrawal. You go through withdrawals if you don't have your cell phone or don't have access to pornography or can't call that person or can't act out in some way or can't. You go through withdrawals, and that might feel like mood swings, irritability, confusion, just frustrated, okay, or even sadness because you can't get your drug of choice, which in this case would be sexuality. It takes more time pursuing behavior. You find on both sides it's taking more time to do your addiction because you're using it more often, and or you're extending the types of behavior that you're getting into. And lastly, you have less time for your friends, less time for social, less time for work. You're finding yourself shortcutting relationships and even your marriage and other things so that you have more time for your addictive behavior. You might be staying up to 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and getting up at 5 exhausted at work, okay, because less time for other things. Now, if you have 3 or more of these several characteristics, you have an addiction. And if you have a sex addiction, you're addicted to sex in an object relationship way. This is where sexless comes in. See, sex with object. When you have a sexual release, you get these endorphins and enkephalins, hits the excitement center of your brain, and boom, you attach to whatever it is. Now, if that's fantasy, pornography, or object type people, you are not having relational sex. You're having object sex. But your sexuality is being groomed and attached and really feeling that that's what sex is. You're training your brain that sex is object relationship. It's not relational. It's not emotional. It's not connected. It's not mutual. It's not where I'm connecting to you, and there's no sacredness to it in the addiction. Okay, now some people have their little thing with their spouse, and then they got their thing with their addiction. Okay, some people do it, but what happens over time is the addiction becomes the preference, and then sexlessness begins to occur. Often it occurs in the definition of not present during sex. The spouse feels used, alone, which makes them not really want to be that sexual, which automatically decreases sexuality in the marriage, okay? But also, the preferred sexual encounter is with an object, with a fantasy, with something that doesn't exist, or a person who's willing to be an object. And so what happens is the preference sexuality moves outside the marriage, and so the marriage quality of sex and frequency of sex moves you into a sexless marriage. Now, this is painful and it can be resolved. Someone can be free.